Hello everyone, hope you're doing well today. I've got a clip here of Lewis Goodall. You may remember this guy. He works for the Newsagents. That's the podcast of the centre-left snooty liberal. They look down on the rest of us as if we're unenlightened and immoral, unlike them of course. Though if you watch the Newsagents regularly, you'll see they're often trying to morph reality to fit their very narrow liberal worldview. The latest iteration of this is Lewis himself stating that the Brits are generally pro-immigration.
We sometimes have this narrative that somehow Britain is a kind of uniquely soft touch and that we are uniquely taking loads and loads of people. No, this is a continental-wide problem that probably requires continental-wide solutions, which might have been one of the good reasons to, if we were still in the room when much of this sort of the EU border policy is being discussed, but, that's by the by now.
To be fair, Lewis is actually half right on that. The mass immigration issue is a continent-wide issue, even a Western world-wide issue. But as I've explored many times, it's because it's a feature of the liberal system and the money power that rules it from the top. The EU was a liberal institution anyway, so we couldn't have done anything. That's why we had mass immigration while we're in the EU and get even more when we leave. But never mind, let's crack on.
But I think it is also true to say that even though it is a small number of people, I think because actually, I think most British people are relatively pro-immigration in the abstract. I think most British people actually have been, when you consider how big the waves of immigration have been, particularly since COVID, at one point nearing a sort of net migration of nearly 1 million. It's actually extraordinary how sanguine and how accepting the British public overall are about immigrants and about immigration.
Now, if you're wondering where he got any data stating the British are generally pro-immigration from, it would be his backside, where those liberal farts come from too, that he loves to smell. Now, there are plenty of studies that show that the Brits are not pro-immigration, but these things can be easily manipulated and manufactured by captured institutions. What really tells us what we need to know is how people vote. And every single time there's a mass public vote or opportunity to vote on immigration, the majority always votes against it. I mean, the core argument of Brexit was we could take back control of our borders and therefore we'd be able to stop mass immigration. Of course, many people didn't realise that we're still part of the liberal system regardless, so you're still going to get mass immigration. In fact, they're going to ramp it up to punish you. And this line of Goodall's that we take immigration pretty well, all things considered, does have some merit to it, but again, he's ignoring why. Number one, broadly speaking, the British are quite a polite people who like to be left alone. That means when there are new groups coming in, they just get on with their own lives. Of course, there are many exceptions to that, but en masse, the British are very much like this. We have a long history of an Englishman's home is his castle and so on, individualism and on it goes. However, Lewis is also missing the point as to why immigration goes off relatively unquestioned. The other reason is, despite being told by the leftist types we're pure evil, we're racially obsessed, disgusting and the rest of it, the reality is for decades the mass of the British people really did buy in to the post-ethnic, post-racial, post-identity liberal worldview. It's only in recent years we've started to realise I don't think other groups think this way. But most importantly, and most obviously, if you're a British person and you work for a large corporation or for some institution of the state, they are all in the grip of the leftist liberal ideology. That means if you criticise mass immigration publicly, you might lose your job. You'll certainly have a mark next to your name and be viewed with suspicion. You might, if you criticise mass immigration too strongly, even end up with criminal charges and potential jail time. I'm sure I'm not alone in saying I've received many private messages over the years from people working for state institutions or private corporations about how they have to sit through lectures on Islamophobia or BLM and why they've all got unconscious bias and need to check their privilege. People sit through these things not because they're interested and they believe in what they're being told, but because they have to, otherwise they'll be fired. Of course, for libs like Lewis Goodall, who've come through the sheltered and captured university system and then into a cushy job right at the centre of the liberal machine, it's all working wonderfully. However, he doesn't see that the rest of us see this mass DEI and immigration push as really just one big corporate shakedown and one big example of massive ideological blackmail. Now, every time the Brits see a little shaft of light, they jump towards it like a plant leaping towards the sun. Please, no more mass immigration. And then the Prime Minister of the age stands by his lectern with British flags behind him, looking all authoritative, saying, "You're completely right, I stand with you. Immigration's out of control and we need to have strong borders." And after that, they proceed to do absolutely nothing but continue the mass immigration project because, as I keep saying, it's a fundamental feature of the Liberal regime. In fact, the only action they take is mass state propaganda programs to try and convince you that mass immigration and multiculturalism is good. And this is where the real evil genius of the system kicks in, because the propaganda doesn't tend to work on older people who are more rooted in their identity and have lived a life. So, they've got more confirmed political understanding. But it works a treat on young people in their messianic stage, looking to rebel and stick it to their parents. And this is why we find, there's a massive swing to the right going on in the country. Amongst 18 to 24-year-olds, there's a massive swing to the left. Most youngsters are voting Lib Dem, Labour, and especially the Green Party. But you can really see the evil twist in the system with this data. This is white British Gen Z voting intentions for youngsters. With young white British men, 16 to 25, the majority will vote for Reform. They're doing the best. If you look at the women, they get the Greens. You'd expect that, but only just. Reform are polling 22% with young white British women. And you might say, why is there such a big disparity between the broader voting intention and those with young whites? Well, the answer is obvious. Okay, there might be some disparities in the research methods to get this data, but broadly speaking, it's because diversity is huge amongst young people now. The births of non-white Brits are absolutely massive, and therefore it's skewing the vote towards the left wing. And this is another key dimension as to why the system is so pro-mass immigration. It swamps the native vote and allows the Liberal system to enforce its own power, then useful idiots like Lewis Goodall back it up, as well as naive youngsters who've bought into the system, thinking they're some sort of moral heroes for being against the traditions of the nations they're from. As you can see, it's quite a scummy and Machiavellian dynamic they've set up, really, but complain too much and you might be spending the night in a jail cell. But in a way, I don't blame our young people. They've grown up in a completely disjointed environment. They don't have any culture, they don't have any tradition anymore, they don't have any higher spirituality, so they've got no coordinates in life. It means they're ripe for exploitation via neoliberal political ideologies of the age. We have to remember the brainwashing is constant. This is the BBC trying to appeal to the kids, with stand-up comedy.
Hello? Anybody there? What, you think you're funny? You think you can make me laugh? Well, listen up. The BBC has appointed me the head judge of the BBC New Comedy Awards. Mwah. Me. Can you believe it? All of this. What are you saying now, huh? Thought I couldn't do it? Nah, look at me, mum. This is the BBC New Comedy Awards.
This then goes on to show a trans woman who basically talks about how she has a dick and tries to, scare men with it and things like that on the bus, who, of course, is all implying a pervert. But she then goes on to speak about how happy she is since she's transitioned to, whooping cheers from the audience. And, of course, this isn't comedy, it's just mass propaganda, and most of the media young people imbibe is like this. Now, incidentally, this is why some of Gen Z are shifting very hard to the right in rebellion against this, but we must remember that's not happening en masse. The Liberal system is all right letting that happen as long as it controls the bulk of the young. So even if an increasing amount of young men are, quote, based and red-pilled, the reality is they have no influence on the actual system. They have no real political power. And even if they do try and speak to even the mainstream right, they'll just be mocked. Here's Mike Graham. He's quite detestable, this fella. He lost his job recently. He said he was hacked on social media. But here he is talking to someone who has concerns about the demographic replacement of the British people.
Why don't you quote what's on the ONS statistics about demographic replacement?
Well, why don't you read it out to me, and that way you can't then accuse me of not allowing you to do it?
Certainly. In short, the Indigenous British people will be a minority in England by 2060. You said this was wrong, but you won't discuss it with anyone. Why?
Well, I'm discussing it with you, Sarah.
Yes. An ugly man inside and out, it seems. Anyhow, let's see what the number one man is up to, the Starminator, at a time where the British people feel the integrity of their nation is falling apart. He's been speaking to Muslims, telling them how he's going to protect them against the evil far right.
I'm so sorry that we're meeting in these circumstances because that was a horrific attack. that will have impacted every single member of the community. We've just been talking to some of the family members and getting a sense firsthand of the personal impact. I'm really pleased today that we are announcing a further £10 million to support our mosques on top of the support we've already put in. I'm pleased to say that. I'm sad to say it as well, in a sense, because I wish we didn't need to put in more security. We shouldn't need to have security in places of worship. And it's sad that we do, but that just reflects the responsibility on me, on the Home Secretary, to do everything we can to tackle hate crime.
Now, I have to say this for Starmer's Stasi because they're so insane, but I don't think any of us are pro just attacking any communities here. That's not the point. The point is, where's this energy after Southport? Why isn't he upset about the British people and how they feel when they're under mass attack? Then it's shut up, and if you post anything on social media, we'll throw you in jail within 24 hours. But then we're not one of his client groups, are we? We are, generally speaking, an irritant to the aims of the liberal world, and that's why they want to continue their mass immigration project, because then they can finally start doing their studies and show that the, quote, British public are pro-mass immigration because there are no British people there anymore. Then Lewis Goodall will feel good about himself. But there may well be a sting in the tail for the Keir Starmer and Lewis Goodalls of the world, and that's because I think the British, like many Europeans and many Western nations, are starting to realise we're at an epochal stage of the mass immigration project. We're shifting from minorities in the country, quote-unquote, to simply being a minority ourselves amongst other minorities. Total liberal, multicultural pluralism. I believe the Western people are waking up to that, and they are going to start to say, no, we didn't vote for this, and you have no moral high ground here. In fact, you're trying to eradicate the Western people at this point. And of course our liberal overlords say, well, this is just hatred and hyperbole. But of course they don't have to deal with the realities of mass immigration and multiculturalism. They only get the multicultural elite and live in the affluent areas. The rest of us are seeing things like this.
The future is ours. Every ideal nightmare of a Muslim Europe will come true.
Birmingham will not tolerate the disrespect of our Prophet, peace be upon him, and there will be outcomes from your actions. You will have repercussions for your actions. We have been trained from birth that we must defend the honor of our Prophet, and we will lay our life on the line.
And again, we're supposed to treat this as absolutely normal. Nothing happens to this guy, and we look at cities like Birmingham, Leicester, London, Luton, and see they've been completely taken over. If we speak about it, we're seen as evil. Do we think this is going to slow down, or is it going to increase in the coming decades? We're supposed to believe that the British public just want more mass immigration and more state managerialism to turn this multicultural dystopia into a wonderful land of Eden where everything is perfect. Just give Keir Starmer a couple more years. I'm sure he'll work it out, hey? Anyway, do let me know what you think about this down below, and do consider subscribing to the channel if you're new.